The Seattle Kraken hit the 20-game mark and get a big win over the Nashville Predators. So, what do we know about this team? Also, where is Shane Wright?
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team every single day. Erica L. Ayala in the UMA hat. That's what we're calling it these days. Kraken got a win, so I'm wearing our win pirate hat. And also here with Zame Beg. So excited to have you join us, Zame, especially considering all of the foul weather afoot in Seattle. How are you holding up?
Well, I have not had power for 2 days. I am filming from an undisclosed location that does have power, and they say power might not come back until Saturday. So, looking at 5 days without power, it's been a rough week. But I love recording these episodes with you so much, Erica. It is genuinely, I was like, we have to find a way to make this happen if we can make this happen. And we did, because it is one of the highlights of my entire week.
Well, happy to hear that. So glad that you are safe and warm and with Wi-Fi and that you're joining us here. To say the least, we just want to extend our well wishes to anyone else that may be dealing with the inconveniences of the power outage. Hopefully you are safe. We hope you and yours are safe and warm. And if you're listening, that we can give you a little bit of joy in the middle of your day. Before we get into our conversations, want to let you know that today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And Zame, where we're going to get started here is we're going to get into the win. We're going to get into the homestand. We're also going to talk about Daniel Sprong. But there was something that was a little bit less of a news story last game as compared to the Rangers game that I think is worth talking about. And I just want to put it out there. What's Wright doing wrong?
What I think Wright is doing wrong, and it's really hard to make, not to make all sorts of jokes about this. So, look, Shane Wright has been with perhaps not the most defensively responsible line mates. And Shane, I think his default instinct, unlike most young players, is he wants to play defense. He be defensively responsible first, and then let the offense come later.
Yep.
That is not why Shane Wright was drafted 4th overall. That is not why he was the presumptive number 1 overall pick for several years as an exceptional status player, because he is exceptionally offensively talented. And I think that when he was in training camp and early part of the season, when we talked about him, he was aggressive and he was hunting goals and he's getting to the front of the net. And I think that he has, it's crazy to say this about a young player, but built bad habits by really focusing too much on being the defensively responsible adult in the room and covering for his not so defensively responsible line mates. I think he's trying to he's just not where his head needs to be, even though he's playing good hockey. It's just not the right flavor or right brand of hockey that the Kraken need to get out of him, because they can find a defensively responsible center like Ben Myers.
Oh boy, Zame, I love that you went there, because that was my hunch. That was my gut feeling. We've heard from Dan Bylsma after the Rangers game. He was asked explicitly about Shane Wright being a healthy scratch? And I thought he had a great answer. He didn't talk about defense like you just did, but what the message was is that, you know, he's maybe not where we want him to be. This was an opportunity just to step back, observe, and then be able to get after it. Now, we saw Oliver Bjorkstrand and Ty Cartier also healthy scratches this season. They did get it back into the lineup immediately and both got on the score sheet. So I think that that's kind of how I was taking the Shane Wright healthy scratch. I wasn't necessarily anticipating that he was going to be a healthy scratch, especially against a Nashville Predators team, but he was. And so, you know, I love your analysis because I've said multiple times over that, you know, we have good defensive metrics as a Seattle hockey team, especially thinking about last year. But to your point, the defensive responsibility, I've broken this down a few times before, including in that Rangers game. The defensive responsibility often falls to the wayside. And I am with you. Shane Wright is far from the most egregious example of forwards not supporting our defensive units on the Seattle Kraken or the goaltending on the Seattle Kraken. He is far from that. And so we're kind of putting things together here, but what it sounds like to me is that maybe you think the Seattle Kraken want him to let go of a little bit of that in service to being more offensive minded. And I'm of a few different opinions on that, but chief among them, it's really hard for me to consider anyone in this organization being put out by someone playing solid defense because, again, it's just not something that we see all the time. That's number one. But number two, like, is it that they feel that Shane Wright needs to do one or the other and that he's not a both and? I think back to Zame, a lot of the conversation around Matty Beniers last year. Oh, well, you know, he's been asked to focus on the face-off more, and that's why his numbers are down. How are you going to be a top six centerman if you can't win the face-off? An area where the Seattle Kraken struggled last year for sure. So I don't know. Like, I think your analysis is really intriguing. And is that where we are with the Kraken? Like, are those the conversations that Dan Bilesma is having? I don't know. That seems like hard for me to fathom. So then it goes back to, well, then what is Shane Wright doing wrong, if anything?
I think that, and there's a lot of nuance here, right? It's like a 10% shift from defensive to offensive mindset. You know, now it changes the player profile considerably. There is a way to have your cake and eat it too, specifically with the player prototypes of the Shane Wright and Matty Beniers, both of whom have said Patrice Bergeron was someone they idolized. Now, there's a YouTube video, and we can put a link to this. It's some Boston Bruins fans lovingly put together it's like a 45-minute montage of Patrice Bergeron doing little things, breaking up little plays in his defensive end and making little plays in the offensive end and just setting up teammates. And they're not all goals, and most of them aren't goals, but it's just like 45 minutes of this dude who is so good on both ends of the ice and doing it in such little nuanced ways. It is one of my favorite sports videos. You learn so much about what goes into hockey on a play-by-play basis. And when I see Shane Wright, I always think about that Patrice Bergeron video and like, how closely is he mapping to that? And when Wright was on his game earlier, he's doing things in both ends. Right now, the things aren't happening in the offensive end, but it's not like you have to sacrifice both defense and offense, and you have to move the slider one way or the other, because we have the shining example of one of the greatest forwards of all time. I love him so much. I'm not even a Bruins fan. It's just an absolute joy to watch him play hockey. I miss him so much. And I hope to someday see a little bit of Patrice Bergeron, or a lot of them, in both Maddie and Shane. And so maybe I'm ascribing my hopes to them. But yeah, I can see that's the player profile they're trying to achieve. And I think that's a good blueprint. And so, yeah, you can have both.
Yeah. And yeah, again, we're kind of estimating, perhaps providing different hypotheticals of what could be the situation in the scenario. 2 healthy scratches, as maybe they're trying to give Ben Meyers an extended tryout per se, not the end of the world. And again, I do think, I've said this before, but I do think Dan Bylsma he's told us this, and I think that he's in constant communication with his players. So while you and I are just kind of waxing poetic, I am also of the belief that Shane Wright knows why Shane Wright has been a healthy scratch for the last 2 games. I agree with that. Yeah, I don't think that he's like, oh, why don't they like me? When? Like, first of all, I don't think that encapsulates his character, but also I don't think that it's a situation where, it's like you've been sent to the corner to sit and think about what you've done with absolutely no indication of what you actually did wrong. I think it's a step back, like we heard from Dan Bylsma the other day. Step back. We want you to see certain aspects of the game and then attack it. I think also it could be, hey, you know what? We know we're going to have to make some roster moves. We're going to give Ben a shot here. We'll get back at you soon. And before we close out this first segment and move on to the homestand recap, that leads me to bring up a quote that the amazing Mike Benton got from Ron Francis just ahead of the Nashville Predators game, which again, we're going to break down a little bit more in the next segment. But Mike Benton and Ron Francis talking about the inevitable roster changes and roster moves that are on the way. Now, I will say that these are not tomorrow problems. They might be next week, next month problems from what it sounds like, because Vince Dunn, although he has been skating, still a couple of weeks back, a couple of weeks away from him coming back. Same thing with Jordan Eberle, no real update there yet, but he also is not on LTIR. So just thinking about Dunn, this is what Francis told Benton. We're going to have to do something to get underneath the cap. So whether that's a waiver, sending somebody down, assigning somebody to the minors, or making a trade, those are options we have to explore. And then he goes on to say, but again, that's not an immediate concern. It is something coming down the pike. Do you think there is any world in which Shane Wright is directly a part of some of those roster moves?
No, because he doesn't make enough money, and it doesn't solve any of your problems. The problem is Vince Dunn comes back, and then the Kraken are capped out. One thing that I think is interesting that you said, maybe this is a setup for other roster moves. Maybe trying out Ben Meyers at center, because they're potentially considering, if he plays well at center, can they trade Yanni Gourde? And now Ben Meyers becomes your 4th center. Mm-hmm. Or if they try him out and he's a disaster, then they know that they can't trade Yanni Gourde, and then that makes it more likely that they trade Brandon Tanev or Eeli Tolvanen. So that could also be part of this as well.
Yes, indeed. So what's wrong with Shane Wright? What's Shane Wright doing wrong? It might be nothing. This is all likely in service to, again, the moves that are coming. But coming up, I know that's a little bit of a downer, Kraken fans. We did get a win. That's why we got the UMA hat on. So we're going to break down the homestand, which of course ended with a 3-0 shutout win in front of Joey Daccord. That's coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken, as I mentioned at the top of the show, brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers who bet $5 will get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check on the latest stats, live play-by-play, and so much more on the very same page where you place your NFL bets. So visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Want to let you know today's episode of Locked On Kraken also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an amazing app to have if you are someone who enjoys concerts, if you enjoy theater, if you enjoy sports, and if you enjoy travel like me. That's because Game Time can help you filter out the fluff to show only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. That's the Game Time Picks filter. Game Time's also great because they have all kinds of curated options for you, super deal. You can take a look at the view from your seats right in the app at Game Time. And of course, you get the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and so much more. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. As you know, the Locked On Podcast Network, a part of the Tegna family. So you can also check out our friends over at King 5, who will have some of our clips from our Locked On shows, as well as other ways to promote the show and all of the news that you need for your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken. You can find again in the Tegna family, including us right here, Zame, on Locked On Kraken. And we want to get into this homestand. It felt important coming into the homestand, Zame, for the Seattle Kraken to get back into the win column and to collect some wins. Now, we did see that they won 5 out of their 6. They didn't get the clean sweep, but in a part of that was, of course, 4 consecutive wins. What's the big takeaway for you from this homestand?
I think it's the team is figuring out their identity, and on the road trip, they had some real issues with trying to figure out what do we do. So the initial problem presented to the NHL is we are the Coachella Valley Firebirds, Seattle Kraken edition. We're moving up and down the ice. We're scoring in transition. What you got for us?
Right.
And then team said, okay, we're going to play our players a little bit more defensively, play back a little bit, clog defensive or neutral zone. And we're going to sacrifice a little bit of offensive push, but we're going to stop what you do well. Right. And then the Kraken's offense completely collapsed. They couldn't figure out what was going on, or at least they were using the road trip to try to figure out what's going on. Now they're still looking to push and score in transition and do the things that they do well. But now they've figured out, okay, well, now we can score off the cycle and they can dump and chase. And, it's like an NBA team that can't score on the half court or a basketball team that can't score on the half court, right? Yep. And it's kind of the same thing here. Well, now the offense, it's starting to work. And also I think just the coalescing of players as they understand each other's tendencies. The passing is more precise. People are less throwing the puck to an open space where they expect somebody to be and there's not, and then it's turnover. So there's some of that just chemistry going on. But strategically, I think that the Kraken had an approach. Someone had a counter, and they had to figure out the counter to the counter. And now they're doing that.
Yeah, I really think it's a great analogy. You talk about, again, in basketball, you have your half court set for setting up your offense versus in transition, which is effectively what what the Seattle Kraken very loudly said they were going to do. So it's like, oh, okay, if you want to run, all we're going to do is there's two ways to stop a team that wants to play in transition. You either just score a lot on them, so you're always resetting, right, in center ice, or to your point, you hunker down and you make sure that, like you said, you just maybe you're not as aggressive offensively so that you always can, if you don't have numbers, you can always quickly get numbers back to counter the attack. And when you have a team like the Seattle Kraken, that even before Dan Bilesma, we kind of talked and alluded to this in the first segment, they're not a group of forwards that are going to get you the puck by playing sound, heady defense, even in their own defensive zone. That's going to be a problem. And so what were we hearing before the homestand? We need to win more puck battles. We need to win the battles along the boards, 50-50 pucks. Those are the ways. And it's maybe a more easier on the ear way of saying play defense than play defense. But that's effectively what Dan Bilesma was asking for. Now, do I think that we've solved all of our defensive problems? No. That being said, we also have figured some things out. And we're going to talk specifically about Daniel Sprong in the next segment. But a few episodes ago, it was really interesting, Zane, to give listeners an insight and a look into how Yanni Gourde and Andrei Burakovsky were talking about how the timing and, quite honestly, the confidence is starting to come back on the offensive side.
Yeah, you see players, they're now, they have more idea of what to do and what's happening, and you can see it, and they're more decisive with their approach. And last night's game against Nashville was a really, really good example of that. In the first period, they were keeping all the Nashville shots out to the outside defensively. And then on the other side, they're getting to the front of the net. They're getting to the dirty areas, and they're creating chances. UC Saros was cosplaying as a brick wall, which is the only reason why the Kraken weren't up 2-0 or 3-0 after the first period. But they were doing everything right on both ends. And it was great to see, because it wasn't just that, okay, we now understand that we can execute both of these strategies, but it seemed like we now know that we can, and they were being decisive about it. And we understand what's going to happen as opposed to guessing what we hope is going to happen.
Yeah, decisiveness, confidence. So they get 5 out of 6 at home. All wins belong to Joey Daccord. I feel like we've talked so much about goaltending. I've talked about it a lot, even without you, Zane. Sorry, about just we don't give enough goal support to Philip Grubauer. That's still happening, but the Seattle Kraken, with how they were able to play at home, they're able to stay above, or to get to and then stay above 500. 18 goals in their last 6 games. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about Daniel Sprong and how he's been a part of at least getting more shots on goal, more quality shots on goal in the next segment. But the other question before we move on, Zane, is so what do we need to bottle up? We've got a home and home series. That means the Seattle Kraken will play 1 on the road and then 1 at home against the same opponents. And they're both the Pacific Division opponents. They're both Pacific Division opponents that are below us in the standings. However, you don't want to get got, especially against teams that, at least statistically speaking, you should be able to beat. So what do you want to see that worked in the homestand happen as we play the next handful of games to close out November?
I wanted to see them keep going to the net. And these things are cliches for a reason. When I say, oh, well, we got pucks in deep and get shots in the net, and we just go out there and play a good game, boys. But there's a lot of truth to that. And when you try to get too fancy and try to move up and down the ice, and if you can do that against a bad team or a team that has had a defensive breakdown on a play, that's great. But the mentality this homestand is, okay, you know what, that's not how we're going to necessarily get goals. We got to go out and earn it. And that has been the mentality shift that has changed from the road trip to the homestand. and they just have to keep that up. I don't know if it's the home energy that energizes them. I mean, we don't know. It is weird because under Dave Haxtell, the Kraken were better on the road than at home. Like home games were. It's like, oh yeah, they're they go on a road trip and they're winning a ton, and everyone comes, and you go to a home game, and then it's like, and then they lose like 4-0 or something, and it's like, and they lose like 2 of the next 3. It's like, and
I know.
the home crowd is so. Now we're getting the opposite for the first time really in franchise history, where the Kraken, they're winning a lot at home, and it's like, it's really nice. It's great. So I don't know what's going on here, but I want them to keep that mindset up.
Yeah, I think also it's going to be interesting because there are some players that perhaps are playing to stick with the Kraken. We alluded to that in the first segment. Daniel Sprong is here. I know you talked about that once on one of our Thursday, but like, he is coming. Well, he has arrived and he's gotten on the score sheet. So, and he is feeling more confident. So we're going to talk about that and how Daniel Sprong is acclimating, but then also potentially, again, if Sprong's taking up a roster spot, what does that mean for Gord, Tanev, and perhaps even Ellie Tolvanen, or honestly, anyone else who can't find their way to get on the score sheet and help this offense, whether they're at home, whether they're on the road, and hopefully just to really build some consistency with the Seattle Kraken offense. We'll get into that a little bit coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100x your cash. You can run your game all season long with PrizePicks. Again, PrizePicks is the best way to get in on sports action in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. And it's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineup stays in play even if one of your players gets injured. PrizePicks also likes to put their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your pick hits, you can get money in as quick as 15 minutes. So there you go. Now you got your lunch money. PrizePicks now offers Venmo for a quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this sports season. So download the app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, head to your app store, download the PrizePicks app, use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, Zane, it's post-game day, post-Seattle Kraken win, and one of the players that got on the board, Daniel Sprong, he was one of 3 recipients of a Chandler Stevenson assist. Chandler Stevenson, I believe, had 2 primary and the secondary assist on the empty net goal. So Chandler Stevenson, we love to see him getting active. Talk about centerman playing the right way, making an impact offensively. I think perhaps he is the standard a la our first conversation for Shane Wright, especially on the offensive side. So you love to see Stevenson going. Brandon Montour, you want to talk about good defense. Oh my gosh, Brandon Montour. Mwah. Chef's kiss. Monty, yes, please. And thank you so very much on the breakaway, being able to keep the puck. You talked about cycling earlier, even the way that the Sprong goal stayed in the offensive zone, a great play on the blue line by Montour. So we love to see these 7-7 guys, as I like to say. I think that we're just going to call them the 7-7 guys, but we love to see the 7-7 guys getting active, but it's also been good to see Daniel Sprong start to find his stride. He's really been telling us in the last handful of days since Sunday, getting time to practice with the Seattle team. some of what you talked about in the last segment, or what the Kraken players have been saying, the predictability factor, playing predictable, slowing it down, keeping it simple, has really benefited Daniel Sprong to the point where we heard from him post-game yesterday, Zane, that he feels that the shots on goal that he had, I think it was about 6 shots that he was able to produce, that's more of the game that he wants to see. And he's starting to feel it click with this Seattle Kraken roster.
Yeah, it was a really, really interesting night for Daniel Sprong and also Chandler Stevenson. I was sharpening my pitchforks and carving my torches after the first period. That line was absolutely awful. I mean, truly awful. We were talking the press bridge, like, okay, let's have a drinking game. Anytime the Kraken have an extended shift in their zone, is number 9 out there and with 91? And the answer was yes. And it was like the last three times in the asset period, they're out there for like 2 minutes. They couldn't get out of their zone. And these are supposed to be offensive guys, and they just could not beat a forecheck to save their lives. And so then, somebody said, well, it's only 554 more games until Chandler Stevenson is a free agent. So that's where we were after the first period. It was really bad. They had something like a full fifth of an expected goal differential negative when they're on the ice after one period. It was just, and so, there was a lot of despondency. Well, that's not what they're there for. And so Daniel Sprong gets his 6 shots on goal, which is a lot. He is, he gets set up by Chandler Stevenson on this absolutely gorgeous assist. Sprong he's on the power play. The Kraken power play is currently the power outage has spread to the Kraken, and they've now scored on their last 9 power play attempts going back to the Chicago game. It's unclear if because this started before the power outage in Seattle, did the Kraken cause what happened here, or was it an explosive cyclogenic event caused by a rapid drop in pressure? Nobody really knows, and many are asking. But regardless, the power play, it's not happening right now, and they're trying to get something working. And I think the power play looked good last night. They were creating chances. Again, Saros was just, he's one of the best goalies in the world, and when he's on, he is just like what do you do against a good goalie? At the top of the game. And so I think things are still, they're coming together. There's still some things they're figuring out, but I like the direction we're going. And the power play has been kind of an issue. They've been about average, but you want to be better than that if you want to be a playoff team. And Daniel Sprong certainly helps there.
I want to play, Zame, this clip. It is from Dave Haxtell, or excuse me, hello, he's gone. It is from he gone. This is from Dan Bilesma, talking about a benchmark that he told us about, which is 20 games.
I mentioned the 20 game mark is really every year I'm coaching is to, should have a clear understanding, both everybody watching and the guys in the room, about how we want to play and how we want to compete every night. As a group, and I think we're still in that process right now. We've had some success early on in the season. We've had some bumps and we've had some bruises, especially on the road trip. And I think the homestand so far, winning 4 or 5, is a response to that. But that's still a work in progress, is to see what kind of team we're going to be every night.
Yeah, what kind of team we have in this Kraken roster every night. Obviously, he was speaking before the Nashville game. That's why he said 4 of 5, not 5 of 6. But I think this is still something that we've got to keep an eye on, Zame, for the next 20 games.
Yeah, clearly they have some idea where they are after 20 games, but it is also clear that there is still a lot to be figured out, which is pretty normal. Even if they had the same coach, every team in every sport goes through ebbs and flows over the course of a season. That's just it's how it always is. And we don't want to be caught prisoner of the moment and just focus on the last thing we saw and assume that's what we're going to see for the rest of the year.
Right.
So they're trying to figure out their offense, trying to figure out the power play, they're trying to figure out the line combinations, they're trying to figure out Shane Wright's role. They're probably trying to figure out which player gets moved for salary cap reasons. So the upcoming roster shakeup is interesting because it's coming, and often you don't have months to plan for a big roster move. But the Kraken clearly do have that time, and so that also informs how they're setting their lineups and who goes up and down from Coachella Valley. It really is the thing that's hanging over the team, and until that roster move happens, we really are going to be in some state of flux.
Yeah, I appreciate you breaking that down, because as you were speaking, what I'm thinking is, and this goes back to what the conversation we were having about, is Shane Wright actually doing anything wrong, or is this more of seeing what Ben Myers can potentially do? Just as an example, my hope is, because again, I read the quote from Ron Francis. He's been pretty consistent in saying it's not something that we have to decide right now. The plan will not be activated until Vince Dunn is back in the lineup. We know that for sure. And perhaps a little bit of the discomfort, or as I like to say, the transition from, a really cute and tight haircut to trying to grow it to shoulder length again, is that there's a little bit of tinkering that's still done. Do I think that Dan Bylsma wanted when the season started to be in this position where he's still kind of futzing things around? Probably not. And these are the cards that have been dealt. To your point, there is an extended period of time where the Seattle Kraken can control the environment, so to speak. And I think that's what we're seeing.
And if you use the benchmark that is so common, are you in a playoff spot around American Thanksgiving, then you're doing okay. And right now the Kraken are tied with the 8th. I mean, they're 9th place, but they're like 1 win out of 7. So they haven't been buried. This isn't the inaugural season, or I think it was last year as well. But certainly, the Kraken are on pace where teams say we want to be on pace to be a playoff contender. So even with all the bumps and bruises and growing pains, the Kraken, they're not in a bad spot.
Right. Yeah, agreed. And so it's kind of it feels like as hosts of Locked On Kraken, we're kind of in like a hurry up and wait situation, and it's uncomfortable. But again, those are the cards that have been dealt. There's nothing that needs to immediately be done. And so this is a data collection period. And I'll be okay with that eventually. It's just a little uncomfortable now. But thankfully, the Seattle Kraken did secure 5 out of their 6 home games. And again, they're going to be taking on some opponents. I always look that way because that's where I have the schedule. But I can also do this. There it goes. Now it's on the screen. We also know that at least on paper, I mentioned it's actually 3 Pacific Division opponents. I forgot that the LA King game is like a solo dolo out there. And then we have the home and home with Anaheim and San Jose. So we're taking on the LA Kings, always a team in the Pacific Division that's been able to kind of hang in that 2-3 spot. We see that once again. So that's going to be, I think, a decent test on the road for the Seattle Kraken. Then they stay in California, take on Anaheim before hosting Anaheim. Then they go back to California, take on San Jose, and then they host San Jose in a back-to-back. So we'll probably see Joey Dax and Gruby split that time. But this is a really, I think, winnable stretch, back end stretch in November. So to your point about, US, at least Thanksgiving coming up next week, this is a time where the Seattle Kraken, I think, can start to establish what they want to do foundationally, especially on the offensive side. And now they've gotten a taste of what wins can look like. These were not easy wins. I think Nashville may be a little bit of an outlier, but these, and even to your point, the first period, not great. And unfortunately, that's been a little bit of a trend. But this is now crunch crunch time within the month of November. I really want to see the Seattle Kraken hunker down and continue to press and push the envelope in areas where they know they want to excel. And we talked about it a little bit, getting out fast. In order to get your transition game, you have to do things that maybe you don't want to do, that you haven't been asked to do on the defensive side. Because to your point, the gig is up. The scout is out on the Kraken. Again, we've sung from the high heavens that we want to play a fast game, but are you committed to doing what it takes to really unlock that part of the game? And for me, that's to be determined. I don't think we've seen enough consistency there, but hey, that's why we watch the games and then talk about them right here on Locked On Kraken. Zame, we always appreciate you, but especially appreciate you this episode, making it work. We're so thankful that you are safe and warm again, and hoping that things clear up for you and so many others sooner rather than later. But before we peace out of here, Zame, anything coming down the pike with the Davy Jones locker room crew that you want to amplify?
We have some stuff coming, but we're not quite ready to announce it yet. The power outage delayed some plans, so stay tuned, and we'll have something soon. But in the meantime, comprehensive coverage as usual, as always, every game, before, after, quotes, social media. We cover it all.
We appreciate what you and your team are doing to cover our favorite hockey team, the Seattle Kraken. And as always, you can find Locked On Kraken Monday through Friday on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. And for Zame Beg, I am Erica L. Ayala, reminding you, please, please, please stay safe, stay warm, be kind to yourself, be kind to one another. And here's hoping that I get a chance to keep this hat. I'm starting to bedazzle it now, Zame. We're going to keep the Uma pirate hat going here as the Seattle Kraken take on not one, not two, but 3 Pacific Division opponents to close out November. So let's hold fast, stay true, and loud and proud we say always, let's go Kraken. We'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.